Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to a brand new edition of Social Confoes. I'm Jean-Luc, together with Diego, and we're back again. And starting
So,
next week, we get a lot of guests, but today we've decided to have a cup of. What do you have, Diego?
um, it's actually empty. I forgot to refill it. But guess where I am? This looks
Back
familiar, right?
home. Back home after a very, very long trip. How was it?
Yeah, it was long. We gotta give that to you. Like, yeah, it was long. I was looking forward to getting back like this weekend. Like, really, really looking forward to. And my flight got canceled. Literally, my flight got canceled. So I was in DC one more day.
Okay. Your flight from DC to Miami was canceled.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not just Surinamese flights that got canceled.
No, but believe me, the flight delays and cancellations in the US is horrendous.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Well, I think I had for the last time I traveled, I also had a flight delay. Luckily, they fixed it quite easily. But tell me a little bit about YLI because now you're an YLI alumni. So, what can you tell us about the program? What's really something that you found cool or really stuck out?
So just for some brief context, YLI, the Young Leaders of America's Initiative, is a program by the State Department of the US, and it's basically for all the Americas where business people, entrepreneurs, leaders can apply for if they have a project idea. They've developed the program over the years because I've applied multiple times, and every time I've applied, it has become more comprehensive. So the application process has become more specific. So you'll need to have run a business or a project for at least 2 years now between the ages of 25 and 35. So for young leaders. And what you basically get is if you get selected, you get the opportunity to go through a very comprehensive curriculum to learn about business skills, venture capital, HR, basically business challenges that you could be facing. Uh, there's 8 main categories. And with that, for your business, you apply and you get matched up with a host organization in the US afterwards, which is why we went actually to the USA, the group here, and actually everybody to be placed with a company that's kind of similar in industry, similar challenge. It really depends, and you get to spend a month with them to see how you could either collaborate or solve your business problem.
That's interesting. So tell us a little bit about what can you tell us? What are you allowed to tell us about your hosting company or hosts?
So I got actually matched up really late. So they matched up everyone in different states. So I think it's 20 states in total where 250 fellows from all the Americas get placed. So on average, between I think 10 and 12 fellows per state. And some got matched up pretty early, like 3 months ahead. So they had a lot of time to meet up with their hosts, prepare, etc., to see if they're a match. Other times, it's a bit more difficult to get a match. In my case, unfortunately, well, fortunately, unfortunately, it depends how you look at it. I got matched up really last minute, and it was basically they cold emailed different companies as well because they couldn't really find one, and one liked my application video, so they tried to give it a shot. So for me, in my experience, they're a great company, but I found the match was a bit too, even though industries and everything aligned, there was a mismatch in the scale, as they were like, it was too big of a company, I think, to be able to really get hands on and, really learn the ins and outs of the company, because everything was efficiency and production, and you couldn't really sit with the departments aside from an
It's
hour or two with different managers.
it's interesting, but it does give you an idea how it would be like to scale, for instance.
Yeah,
If you
but
work,
also
yeah,
some validations, like the infrastructure there in the US is totally different than the infrastructure we have here in Latin America and the Caribbean. They have access to resources in supply chain where we have to wait X amount of times, months, to be able to offer certain things with confidence, right?
okay. Give us an example. Give us something that we are free to share publicly.
Say you have a big uh, brand company, like a franchise chain, a coffee franchise, for example, and they have like 100 shops all over the state that they need to rebrand every 2 months. Uh, they can just call suppliers and see if they have materials in stock, and they don't even have to buy in the materials yet because they have that supply chain. Whereas here, for these types of advertisements at that scale, you can't say, yeah, I can provide you at this price, especially with the unstable economy here, because the process takes at least like 6 weeks, minimum 6 weeks there before it goes through approval and production. Whereas here, people want it like, yeah, next week, in 2 weeks' time, X amount of shops, where you don't even have the materials and supplies to be able to deliver the job.
Okay, I'm gonna share an experience of something that recently happened that got me thinking about this. So I can't tell anything about the assignment, but we were given an assignment um, a couple of weeks back, and this was the first time that I had to deliver something that will only be used more than 12 months from now. Like that was the
Yeah,
first time for me that I had to produce something that our company was asked to produce something that would be used over 12 months from now. I was surprised because this is a Surinamese company that works that far in advance.
that's
Like
actually great.
that actually means like it is possible. People do plan ahead.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I thought I had time, but I don't have time because I have to deliver because it has to be done now because of course because of the supply chain.
Yeah.
So very interesting that you mentioned that.
No, the supply chain, especially in print and like physical media, it's like extremely a big constraint here, uh, because there's a shortage of materials worldwide. Even they had a shortage, and they're huge. They're like a big millions of dollars of revenue every month.
So how does this work? Because we're used to social media fast paced. So how do we do this like compared to offline media? How does offline media go about with trends, current trends?
Um, I would I would say they're very, at least the company I was placed with, they focus on influencer packaging. I guess that's what where they stand out. It's one of their niche services where they custom build influencer packages. Like sometimes you see influencer with special boxes, opening a product, etc. That's what they do. Like design it from the ground up, like a Nike shoe in a like a 360 box or something, or whatever. A new game comes out and they make a Minecraft something. So that's something very interesting they do, and kind of been looking, talking with different managers, the creative process, how that goes, and the sales. So basically, they just sell an idea, and and then they go to see what's possible, and that has to match the client's budgets. One thing that's very different or that I haven't seen here is like either companies don't have a budget and it's like, yeah, what can we do with this? But oftentimes the bigger brands, they have budgets for specific things, so you can easily match that up, like, okay, we can produce this, and you have to take into account the creative work that goes into that process as well. And especially if it's a long-term client, uh, you gotta balance it out, from a future project. You can balance that out into a current project just to deliver it. Um, I don't want to go into too much details because
Okay, no, it's good. It's
yeah,
good. So we've covered that a
that,
little bit.
that's my
Then
host experience,
okay, that's
but
your host
that's
experience,
just
and
the
you
host
stayed at
experience.
one host in one state, and then you moved to the graduation part in DC, in one
Yeah,
state.
just before I go to the graduation part in
Okay.
DC. So the host experience was, hit or miss. Some people had an amazing host experience. Others kind of totally fell apart. Mine was somewhere in between, and good. Still had a great relationship with them. But the great thing about the Wila experience, being in a city like for 4 weeks with 10, 12 other fellows, is that was the highlight for me. Like meeting the other fellows from the other countries. And fortunately for us, we were literally placed in the same building, the same hotel. So you could really bond with each other, like network, learn about their business, learn about their cultures, learn about how it is in their countries. And you see like, right, we have similar struggles within, Central America, uh, Colombia, depending on where it is. That, I heard that there's a really tech hub in Brazil now called Uberlandia, and they do like venture capital with Honey and stuff. So this is very interesting stuff you learn from these fellows.
It's interesting that you mentioned Brazil because one of the first things that I researched is the YouTube Partner Program. And the YouTube Partner Program has studios around the world. At least they had them. I'm not familiar if they're still that active. And at a certain point, if you had 10,000 subscribers or more, which a lot of people in Suriname have. We might not have them, but quite some people in Suriname have 10,000 subscribers or more. If you have 10,000 subscribers or more on YouTube, there were certain locations in different cities around the world where you could just walk into a YouTube studio and start creating content. And one of them was in Brazil. So it's kind of interesting, like how certain environments give you a kind of like a competitive edge because if you would have like a space in Suriname, and I'm advocating for this quite a lot, if you have a space in Suriname where you as a creator can go once a month to create content, but like a really professional space where you have all the necessities to create the content, that's one of the most amazing things to have from a creator perspective, of course. And of course, there are other options and other solutions as well. But um, if you just are in that environment, and I think
Yeah,
also that you mentioned speaking
environment
with
plays
people that think similarly, it's a big difference. The other example I want to give is when we were in Panama for the inaugural flight of Copa, and we were there with a group of I think at least 5 creators. It's less weird to walk around with a camera
yeah.
and vlog when it's the five people than when it's just you. You know, you're walking on the street with a camera in front of you, and people are like, and then you have, of course, the version where you walk with somebody with a camera behind. That's completely different, even because that it starts feeling like either a documentary or just plain weird. And but when you're like with 5 people all vlogging at the same time, um, you kind of get into a zone. You kind of catch energy off each other, making it easier to do something compared to like when you're all alone. And I guess it's the same thing with especially solo entrepreneurs.
Yeah, some of them have like teams of 10, 20 people. Some of them were solo entrepreneurs. But even though for me, like I had a generally good experience, um, there is a very strong, I'm not sure if bias is the word. Like when you hear Latin America, Caribbean, it still feels like we are far outnumbered when you're in a cohort, but 9 of the 12 people or 10 of the 12 people speaking Spanish, and you're the only one who can't really communicate. So you get that group, a different group dynamic. So for me, I was able to, still assimilate with the group, but other people kind of felt, from what I've observed and what I've heard in the different states, like that uh, being outnumbered by the Spanish speaking Americas, it's kind of also uh, another bias or disadvantage, especially on the competitive stage. Uh, that those in the Caribbean are always in the underdog position, even in the US.
Yeah. So how's your
It's such a
Spanish? If you rate it, is your Spanish
um,
better than your Chinese?
no,
Oh.
no.
Okay. Okay.
Like I'd rate my Spanish at 3, my Chinese at 3.5.
Okay, okay. So let's pivot from the host experience, and like you said, the best experience is being around those people. You managed to integrate or assimilate quite well. Then you move to DC.
Yeah. So DC
Yeah.
is basically the closing program. About like I think 3 or 4 days. Everyone, like all the 250 people, go into DC for special closing program. I forgot to mention, like everyone had to submit like a, what was it, a 90-second pitch as well, as part of a competition for their solution. And each state had then like uh, the top of each state went into the semi-finalist. So 20 semi-finalists, and out of those 20, 10 were selected to present live or pitch live during the closing ceremony in DC. And I actually got selected for Portland. I was a semi-finalist for Portland, basically. So that, you gotta play the cards that you have, and I used the limitations very creatively, and I had good relationships with everybody. So that kind of gave me the edge. But yeah, there were strong biases going on in the background.
So, but that's
But
that's something that happens everywhere, though.
yeah,
So it's
and
it's good to have that experience to understand those
you
biases.
have, well, once you understand it, it also shows you, like, it's a very human thing. I would say it's a very social thing, even though it's you enter it with expectations of, you have an idea business. You may have the best plans in the world on paper, but you still need to engage with people. And
Simon even says, very, very.
yeah, Simon, we need to get you on here.
Yeah,
We need to
Simon,
talk
that's
about
a
you.
that's a good introduction to actually invite you as a guest for Social
No,
Confoes.
he's already been invited. He's just
Oh,
been
okay, okay.
uh,
We just have to set a date.
avoiding the
I,
date.
okay, I quickly want to jump into Sharisa's comment on supporting the creative space. The creative space is gonna come. The creative space is gonna come one way or another in the next couple of years. I'm really trying to get a couple of companies together that would benefit the most from it, because in the end it has to be a win-win. Casey Neistat did it on his own in New York, just created the space out of thin air just because he wanted to do it and felt great. But I think we need in Suriname a much more structured approach. We need at least some backing from bigger companies to have a proper creative space. And there are already a couple of initiatives, which
Yeah,
is good.
because it is an investment, and especially if you want to up production with these new corporate bigger companies,
Yeah. It's
investing in
gonna
something
take
would
some
be
time, but it's
advantageous.
something that's between now and I'm gonna be careful. I think 3 years from now, we should be able to have a proper creative space which can be rented out or you can use specifically for content creation or creation in general. And there are certain spaces they've been connected to certain organizations, certain companies, but yeah, it's just interesting that bigger cities, especially big cities around the world, kind of have these spaces which are predefined already for if you, for instance, have a lot of YouTube subscribers, whereas smaller creators have just first have to prove themselves. But I do feel like it's an interesting topic because we also talk about overrated, underrated quite a lot. So would you now say that networking is overrated or underrated?
I would say even more underrated now. Like I was a firm believer in, when your network falls apart, your network is there to catch it. So your network is or equals greater your net worth.
Your network
And
is your net worth.
I think who was it? A few months ago, we had Tyler from Hawaii on like
Yeah,
that social capital. It is something very real
yeah.
that's into play. So
But
networking is.
it does raise a concern, doesn't it? Like currently,
I see
like
where you're going at,
yeah,
but I see where you're going at, but that's where I think ethics and values play a supporting secondary role, a strong pillar in that part. But I stand by it. Networking is severely underrated.
yeah.
If you're shy, not used to it, just practice, be yourself, but find your own way. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to network
Oh,
effectively.
you can just go on social media and respond to people.
Yeah.
I mean that's I think one of the most underrated strategies there is. Like if you want to network but you're an introvert, start by just
Just
placing
add
genuine interest and genuine comments
comments.
on
If someone asks for
yeah,
something, give a genuine answer, refer them to someone. Your name will pop up and people will
yeah,
start to recognize you.
recognize it.
Yeah.
Good one. Just a shout out to the people watching on Twitch as well. So how was the so what was the one thing, because you're in a host do you also get like training sessions and those kind of things, or is just you join the
Yeah.
host company, or do you also
So
get separate training sessions as well?
So the program went out like this. They paired you up with the host company. Of course, the arrangement agreements you make with the host company depends on you and the host. Some can put the whole curriculum. Some are hands-on projects. But every week there was like the Friday where they had either like networking sessions or training sessions, and these training sessions were specifically focused on the pitch. Um, so we had a coach, like a TEDx coach, to reviews everyone pitch, etc. And I gotta say, like when I went to, I didn't really prepare my pitch yet at that first meeting because we had to miss the first week because of a COVID situation. So we were kind of on a tighter schedule, and just did mine on the fly. Yes, volunteers. I just went first and did it on the fly. So one thing I valued or what stuck by me is I'm very the techniques or approaches I did was not common strategies. And the feedback that stuck from me from the coach was like, um, he basically said, oftentimes he won't recommend those strategies, but because you're the one delivering it, it works. And because he also aligned with the topic, it worked. So that kind of gave me some conviction validation on, not don't just follow the handrails plan. Look, this is how you gotta do a pitch, etc. Some things match your personality, and you're the only one who can deliver it that way.
But could it make it stronger if you use those guidelines?
It could,
Yeah.
but again, it was like based on your, your personality, your charisma, etc., how you deliver it. He would not recommend anyone else deliver it that way, etc. So that was kind of interesting to hear. Like, you know,
You make it work because you own up to it, and it's
yeah,
in your way
it's
authentic.
you. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
you.
it's you. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. That's definitely interesting. So,
Yeah, so that was one part, and then they had in the closing ceremony there were different like kind of cohort master classes and different sessions that you could sign up for. I kind of signed up for half of them, the other half, because everyone would party at night, etc. So some people just slept away, or or just tired. But in general, it was a pretty good experience.
okay, so and then Wila is done, and you go.
Yeah, so basically, I spent another 2 weeks. The program was 5 weeks, so I spent another 2 weeks traveling the USA. So I've kind of done the whole recap today. I think I sent you the overview. It was basically in my total of 53 days in the United States. I had a total of 11 flights and visited 8 states.
Okay, so which 8 states? Of course,
So
you have Oregon,
yeah,
you
so
have
I was
DC.
in Portland,
Yeah,
Oregon. That was for the host placement for 4 weeks. I did a weekend to Seattle, Washington State. That's north of Portland. You could just
yeah.
drive there. And then the closing ceremony was in Washington, D.C., which technically is not a state, which I found out. It's a district, which is,
District Columbia.
yeah,
Okay.
which is a very interesting thing uh, to learn about. It's a basically a 10-mile radius where basically the governing bodies of the US
Yeah.
are, but it's not a state. um, from Washington, D.C., went to New York and the Niagara Falls. Then I flew
Oh,
to Utah, Salt Lake City, and basically I was in a south of Salt Lake City, a smaller town. Then I went to Nevada, Las Vegas, and from there I went to the Grand Canyon, which is in Arizona,
yep.
and then I went back to Washington D.C. and visited Maryland and basically Virginia.
Yeah, Rui is also somebody who has been invited who has to get on. Um, which state did you like best?
So here's the thing: it depends on what aspect of the state. So if you narrow it down, like I'd say New
Give
York is
Give me your top three
overrated.
first. Give me your top three first.
Top three and overall experiences. Uh, because I spent the most time in Portland, uh, and was able to experience that one the most, I'd say Portland. Um, I would put DC over New York just because of where I've been able to go. Previously, New York, I would rank it higher, but I would put DC over New York now. And actually, I found Utah quite interesting because of the landscape. Even though it was hot, I found Utah quite
It was
interesting.
hot in Utah. Wow, that's an interesting. So
Utah is
okay,
basically desert, man.
yeah.
But the
So
mountains are so close. Like every time I went out,
yeah.
the view just didn't get old. Like
Okay.
you're just surrounded by mountains.
Okay. So
And if we're talking overrated, I'd say Las Vegas is overrated.
wow. So I guess I don't have to invite you for my 40th birthday then. No, just kidding. Um,
No, Matt, but
yeah,
that depends on the experience, right? The experience you're going for. I'd say
yeah,
if you're going to Vegas Vegas is basically a huge theme park and huge expensive theme park to blow your money on. But
I feel guilty. I never sent you the cheap options though, but they
no,
were stored away very, very far away in my PC. Actually, they're not even on this PC anymore.
no, that's
Probably,
perfectly fine. But if
yeah,
you're going with the intent, group of friends, etc.,
yeah,
and like going to eat and maybe for activity or a party, etc., then yeah, that's a thing you can do because a lot of things are pretty close and accessible.
yeah.
But
I do feel like, were you alone in Vegas or were you accompanied by someone else or a group?
I was traveling alone all those days,
Okay,
but I met up with people in each
yeah.
state.
No, but I can imagine that Vegas is a totally different experience when you're like one or two people compared to
Yeah.
like in a group.
So that's why I said if
Yeah, I can fully
depending
understand
on
that.
your intent and the
Yeah.
how you're traveling, that can make a difference.
And Utah, I mean, like Salt Lake City. I mean, it's called Salt Lake for city for a reason. What did you experience there that you would say like this puts it into my top three?
Um, Utah is just it's very like population wise, it's very small and it's very relatively flat, as in there's no urban jungle. Like maybe downtown Salt Lake City, yes, but it's relatively small and just the view, the experience of the mountains, the surrounding area. That's just kind of a wow view. Whereas something like New York, it's like basically an urban jungle, which kind of you always have to look over your shoulder to see if you're safe.
um, we have to talk about the topic of food. What's the
Oh
best
my,
food?
yeah, no. I like the people I met up with, I got into food comas, man. I got into food comas.
Okay,
So,
because Danny is complaining that he didn't come back fatter at all.
because I walked a lot, man. I walked a lot. Like,
Sure, sure. And you watched a lot of sundowns in Utah as well.
yeah. So yeah, you have that special kind of sunset because the sun sets slower with the longer days. So and especially after a cloudy or rainy day, you get this pink hue across the sky. So that's very
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know that.
interesting. And the times I went, actually, I was promised heat waves and 45-degree Celsius temperatures. But when I got there, like Utah and Nevada, it was pretty relatively cool. It was very cloudy. It actually stormed in when I was in Vegas. Like the day I went to the Grand Canyon, we had our show last week on Tuesday. Wednesday, I went to the Grand Canyon. It stormed. I was in the Grand Canyon in a thunderstorm in the desert,
Ooh.
like lightning, thunder, like everyone's phone was constantly getting warnings, like flood warnings, etc. And when I got into Vegas that evening, like the wind was blowing hard. So I kind of stayed more indoors that night. And the next day, when I left for my flight, when I was at the airport, it started storming again. And then when I arrived in DC, I saw a news article that like the strip in Las Vegas was flooded by the
Oh,
rain. Yeah.
okay.
So it was a very interesting window. I was in that area.
Okay, but just to recap,
The food, yeah.
you saw the Grand Canyon
Yeah.
and you saw the Niagara
Niagara
Falls,
Falls, yeah.
Niagara Falls, but both didn't make it into your top three states. So let's take that for reference. That kind of tells you how good it was. And
Like cause like Niagara Falls
was
is
it
literally like a
okay? So
7 hour drive from New York City.
was it the Popeyes in DC that put DC in the top three?
No, I what put DC at the top three was literally my last day because my flight canceled. I spent an extra day in DC and I got to see more of the outdoorsy stuff in the park side of DC. And yeah, it's not just, it wasn't DC per se, but basically the state Maryland and Virginia, around that area. So kind of that added to the value of DC. But yeah, the Popeyes in DC was pretty good too.
Okay. So the food, we're talking about Popeyes now. What food was better than the Popeyes in DC?
Ramen, man, ramen. Like I found like a hidden gem, or I got introduced to like a hidden gem. You basically go in a basement. I was in the Adams Morgan area, and then like they serve like genuine. How hot do you want your ramen? Like yeah, in DC and New York, ramen was the best food I had. I ate both places. I ate ramen, and in Vegas, I had an amazing Korean barbecue, like real Korean barbecue.
Okay, you have to understand because for a lot of people, like Marlon is saying, out of everything ramen, like really, you have to understand this isn't the ramen that you go into the supermarket and then you
No,
make.
this is like ramen as in Japanese ramen with pork, beef. Of course, you have your noodles, but the broth is just amazing, man. And if you
Yeah,
add a
so it's
spicy
it's the
thing
broth,
to it.
it's the broth with also the type of noodles because they're a little bit different than we know them here, and some really good meat often as well. I don't know
Yeah,
how important the meat is for you, but for me that's a pretty big deal.
if I had to rank it, like you gotta do pork ramen, like pork, chicken, and then beef. Okay, beef and chicken is pretty similar, but yeah, uh, Asians and pork, Japanese especially, like they make amazing pork, like pulled pork
But
buns.
the pork it mixes quite well
Yeah,
as well. I think that's an important part. Um, Danny asked if if you're talking about the step at the place my sis took us.
like the that place can't even lift a finger to this real Korean barbecue that
Wow, wow,
I.
Danny is calling you out. I have to ask because I've been to a Korean barbecue as well in Koreatown in LA, and that was an interesting one as well because it was in kind of some kind of Second World War bunker. It felt
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and yeah, yeah, I think it was a completely different experience as well. And I like we don't kind of know what it's like. There are certain places that there are lines that people wait in line to get food in Suriname, but not to stay there and eat, just for pickup.
yeah.
And like in the US, there genuinely are places
You
where
have to
you
wait
just
in
stand in
line
line
30, 40 minutes. Like this the
for an
ramen place
hour
in
to get a
DC.
seat at a table, and people
You
don't
have,
leave.
yeah, the
That's
ramen
something
place in
completely.
DC. Dinner
So
time.
yeah. So when it comes to places like eating in the U.S. and eating in Suriname, like in Suriname, hey, it's busy. Let's go to the next place, you know. But this is like, no, we're eating here, and we're gonna stay in line for an hour before we get seated. That's something. That's something that I find very vastly different. Okay, so we had noodles and Korean barbecue. Is there something else that you're like, hey?
Japanese barbecue.
So
Hot pot.
what about yeah other
Like
kind of like
I went on a
yeah
food tour basically. And
yeah
if I can give one piece of a suggestion, if you go traveling, find a local. Find a local to bring you to these hidden gems, like these places. That's where you get the best food.
yeah
Like
not going on Yelp and finding
no,
the highest
no,
rated.
no. Find a local.
Yelp is kind of a very amusing but also a confusing place because the weird thing on Yelp is like it's also I don't know if it's an American thing where like employees or the agency that works for a certain restaurant goes to the Yelp review bar of the other restaurant to leave behind terrible reviews. Like I've seen that on Yelp, I've seen that on TripAdvisor. It's like sometimes you're like, wait a minute, what is this place kind of? Am I gonna get mobbed at this place? Like those kind of things. Like you become really picky of hotels where you stay at because then there will be like 500 one-star reviews and they're like the worst things you can read about. So it's yeah, finding a guide, a local guide, definitely should be like right up there.
Yeah, that if you can find one, like truly, if you have friends who've already been, like, they just get some names. Unlike Shanlu, who didn't send me some names. No worries, I had enough information. So
Yeah, I feel right now you should get on Hive and at least make 8 posts from every state you visited. You should make at least one Hive post out of
no,
it.
that is a very fair point. I have some photos and content. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
something I should put on the to-do list.
Luciano, I have no idea what trend you are talking about. I have really no idea, but feel free to fill us in. So, interesting question by Shamil as well. Uh, did you get souvenirs from all the places that you visited?
Mm, I'm not an intentional collector, but occasionally, if I saw something, I did grab something for my mom just to stick it to the fridge, etc. But it's not that
But
I
you should
need a
have
magnet
gotten
for every state.
you should have gotten 8 magnets, Diego. That's something you just should have done.
Nah, like okay. Here's the thing. Here's
Okay.
the thing. I was very conscious of my luggage. I spent 53 days.
Listen. Don't you can't say conscious of your luggage when we're talking about magnets. Like we're talking about
Yeah, no,
like
Magnus
this
is
size. Like
yeah, no, Magnus is fine. Magnus is fine. I did get a few, but it wasn't intentional. But I spent 53 days in the US with just a carry-on, literally just a carry-on, which saves me about 200 or
oh yeah,
$250
on
from luggage
flights,
flights.
on flights I completely understand. Also, the weight is less,
Yeah,
pretty much less
you
because
just hop
you don't
out
have to
of the
wait
plane,
at the baggage
you're
check
out.
at all.
Yeah, and you're out. So there's a trick on packing your stuff very strategically, packing things that you could mix and match that are light, fold small, spill resistant, etc. So yeah, I was very conscious on the space I had.
So let's get in quickly because Luciano is talking about Asian food. The trend.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, there is a trend there. You completely agree. But I want to jump into Danny's comment because he's mentioning taking a taking tourists to visit Phuket. So give them a good food experience and a sense of nature. So what I really want to know now, before we get back to the clothing, because we have questions on that, Diego. But if you would bring a tourist to one underground spot in Suriname, what would it be and why? Like food wise, right? Or should we do food and drinks?
Food, like Danny basically said it, visited that is an experience.
No, but would that be that if you're like, I'm gonna give you some awesome food that you're not familiar with that it's available in Suriname, and I'm gonna take you to a place where nobody talks about. What's place would that be?
I can't recall a place immediately. Most of the stuff is usually homemade or, you know, someone special makes it. So I can't come up with a place on top of my head for food. Because in general, just go to the market and mix and match something. But I don't go out that much to
No, the market
get some
would be
food.
a good one.
Yeah, just the
Yeah,
Sunday market.
yeah. The Sunday market would already be a um, yeah. Danny, now I'm waiting for an invitation for you to invite me to come have food at your place. So you went there, I'll go there as well. We're waiting for an invitation. Um, but for drinks, I would definitely say Formosa. For food, I don't know either, but for drinks, I would say Formosa.
Formosa. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think I've
definitely
ever been there, but yeah, food,
yeah,
like a market would be a place to experience just
yeah,
a lot of variety. Yeah.
definitely. Then we'll get to the next question. What did you do for clean and fresh clothing with just the carry-on? What's the
You,
trick, Diego? You
the
just
trick is
throw away.
basically you pack enough clothing for like 8 days. That 8 day is basically a buffer day just in case you can't do laundry or you're in transit or travel. You pack for 8 days, and then literally every week you do laundry.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you basically have a day for you to do the laundry and get dry clothes, right? Or do you put it in a dryer as well?
Yeah, you put it in a dryer.
So do you
Like
iron your shirts at all? Do you
no,
get
so
shirts? Okay, so you get shirts that stretch out immediately and need little to no ironing.
yeah, like the past 3 years I've been buying clothes specifically for the purpose of travel. Like
Wow. Okay. I have to give you props on that because I went through that phase as well. Now I buy clothes that I don't have to think about what I'm wearing every day. So basically 80% of my wardrobe is just black, plain black.
yeah, and basically I didn't even need to think about it. Like
Yeah.
it's just two pairs of like black pants, fold small, spill resistant, very lightweight. Um, you can go hiking with them. You can go to a business meeting with them. Basically. Um, shirt, like a lightweight shirt if you want to do outdoorsy stuff, buttoned up shirt, long sleeves, just for a more formal occasion. And then you have shirts and button shirts, so you can combine those for different looks. Shirt only, buttoned up, shirt and look. And long sleeves are important for sunny places, especially to not get burned. You might think it gets hot, but actually it helps against the heat.
Interesting. So, but what's the coldest? How many layers that you have? What's the maximum amount of layers that you needed to wear, like in Oregon?
That I wore like
Yeah,
three,
three. Okay,
three,
and that
but
doesn't take enough space in your. Or do you travel light on jackets as well?
I had a raincoat in my backpack and a jacket and um, towel and a towel. That took like half of the space already. So imagine the other
I
space.
can imagine. Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, I officially have a place now where I'm going to eat this Sunday. So yes, I'm accepting the invitation for Sunday. Bam, it's done. And yes, he has it's no body fat. He also has a smaller size. I think yeah, you're in definitely in an advantage. But I still have to agree with Shamil. You travel very very efficient. It's really interesting. Um, I had one experience when we went to Vegas because we went to Vegas on a bachelor trip that we were traveling very, very light. But that was just for 3 days. So that was kind of like,
Yeah.
the small stretch bags that you could just pull around and you can just basically put one or two outfits in
Right,
maximum.
right, right.
So we had that. But that was just for 3 days. So it's a little different. And I did pack for a week the recent trip to Cuba, I did pack also carry on. I had traveled with a carry on, but I actually still put my carry on with a lock in the. I still booked it as checked baggage um, because it makes it easier to travel. I always travel kind of with my laptop bag as my
Yeah, so I basically had my
yeah,
carry-on and my backpack.
yeah,
And my backpack was filled with my
yeah.
podcasting mic, my laptop. So I also brought equipment with me. uh,
Yep, but that doesn't for some reason that's something interesting I find as well. When you travel with a laptop bag, it doesn't count as a piece of luggage, cabin luggage.
they count it as small items. So you have carry-on, that is your carry-on, and one small item, which is either a backpack or a purse or something. And you'd be surprised what you can fill up with a backpack. And I
Oh
basically
yes,
walk with my jacket outside. So that
Yeah,
doesn't count even because it's a piece of clothing,
yeah,
and you can fit things in your jacket's
yeah.
pockets.
That's a
So
little travel tip. Yeah, it gets a long way until it doesn't. Trust me, I've paid the most I've paid for excess baggage is I think $100.
yeah, I think my carry-on weight like around 15 kgs.
Is it the maximum eight?
No, there is no weight limit in the
Oh, it's
US.
just size limit, right?
Size is just
It's size
size. Yeah,
limit. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
Europe has weight limits, which is I find odd. Like all
yeah.
these
Europe
different
has. I
regions.
can tell you that Europe
Yeah,
has weight limits because I paid €100 once,
yeah.
and I
So
did. I had seriously. I had nothing I could do. I ended up leaving a laptop behind in Helsinki,
yeah,
which I never recovered. I ended up just being like, you know what, forget about it. So
yeah,
I
which
left
which
my.
kind of doesn't make it's weird with these rules, etc. It's in the same cabin, the same plane,
So
space, etc.
here's something I didn't know. The airlines with the cheapest tickets have the most expensive payment system for excessive baggage.
Yeah, I avoid these airlines. Just go with an airline that includes it. And
By the way, you do know your
yeah,
cameras off, right?
yeah. Give me
Okay,
a second. It will be right back
okay.
on.
So that's you. It's good that you avoid them because that's my experience. The airlines with the cheapest tickets have the most expensive excess baggage. I think Lufthansa or one of I'm not sure. I'm not gonna.
Like, if you
They
ever
had
flew with
like a
Ryanair,
20,
Ryanair.
yeah, but I've flown with Ryanair multiple times and I've never been over. Like I never had excessive baggage, but I do remember. I'm not sure which airline it was. I think it was Lufthansa, but I'm not sure about it. That booked 20 or €25 per excess of kilo.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
it's
didn't have a way out. I was traveling back from Helsinki to Tilburg at the time, and there wasn't a lot of stuff I could leave behind, so I had to pack everything.
another tip. Like, yeah, it's sometimes easier to get another checked baggage than to pay for overweight. Um, and another thing I also do is I always carry these small bags, like a small bag, extra bag within my backpack that turns into a big bag that you can just put things in, so it counts as one item.
Yeah,
So you cheat the
yeah,
system.
yeah. There are definitely a lot of ways. So I think it's time for a travel overrated, underrated.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it.
So having a toothbrush with a mini travel size toothpaste, is that underrated or overrated?
Um, I'd say I actually had a normal size toothpaste, which lasted me exactly 7 weeks, and I bought that at my destination. I didn't bring that, so
And the TSA gave you no issues with having
no, it
toothpaste.
was within
Interesting.
the limitation. Like
Okay.
the container, like I bought on Kickstarter a travel bag, specifically dimensions, max dimensions, with a container for liquids, max dimensions specifically. So I had no issues with security whatsoever. Everything was like at the limit.
Shout out to Kickstarter for reading that. Okay, so that's a really interesting. But again, the
I
question:
I
having
would say
toothpaste and a toothbrush available in your hand luggage in the airplane, is it overrated or underrated?
overrated, unless you're traveling more than 24 hours. Even then, I would say slightly overrated because airport you can get stuff. If you can buy these items, especially small items, easily at your destination, just buy it there. Overrated, yeah. um, okay, let's see. Traveling. I would traveling to the USA, overrated or underrated?
Traveling to the USA. Okay, it really depends on how you want to answer that.
For
Uh, yeah,
tourist and for business. Let's separate it in those two
I will
categories.
say for both it's underrated because there's so many places you can go. Like um, most Surinamese people, we tend to go to Florida, right? We either go to Miami,
Okay,
we
okay,
maybe
yeah.
go to
Let's narrow
yeah,
it down.
yeah.
Miami, Florida, the state of Florida, overrated or underrated? Because that's our entry point to the US.
So here's the thing. I'm different from a lot of people. I love Florida. Even though I've been on the West Coast, even though I think, yeah, there's so much more in the US to see than just Florida. And I've recently decided that I'm not traveling through Florida if I don't have to, because we now have like a connection that takes us kind of directly to the West Coast as well. For business, that's definitely where I want to be. I mean, I love San Diego. If I can go every year, I'll go every year. And for business, I love San Diego. I think it's one of the most interesting cities there is. Um, I don't know quite yet how I feel about LA. I have mixed feelings. It's really huge, the city. LA feels like different cities.
Yeah.
It's weird, and I just don't have another way to describe it as just weird. And I kind of, because I've been to Miami and Fort Lauderdale so many times, I'm a little bit set in my ways in the things that I want to do there.
Mm.
And my wife doesn't particularly like that. It's something that I like. Um, so if it's for me, I feel like um, I get most of my enjoyment from it.
So
So
under
for,
Florida, underrated.
for me, it's still underrated. Like how easy it's there. You also get accepted more easily
I can see
because
that.
it's
Yeah.
more culturally
Yeah, it's
diverse.
more mixed.
So it's not like getting weird glances that you would get in other states
Yeah.
where
Like yeah.
it's less diverse.
Oregon was one of the widest states.
Yeah, and it isn't necessarily that people do that, but you do feel
You
like
feel it. You feel it.
you feel the culture and the similarities as well.
Yeah.
You go to certain places and you feel at home, even though you're not at home. And for the children as well. I mean, uh, okay, it's not Florida, but Orlando. I mean, that's Disney World is like
It's still in Florida.
yeah, it's Orlando, Florida, but
Yeah.
it's not Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Underrated then. All right. One more for you
What
and
is overrated? The Everglades. If you're like Surinamese and you've grown up in nature, you kind of like have grown up in the interior of Suriname or have been out of the city a lot in Suriname. The Everglades is one. It's kind of a disappointment. Um, and what is worrisome as well. Uh, some people like myself get the urge to jump into the Everglades to swim
yeah.
or to have fun, which you should definitely not do. But the
Yeah, for
Everglades,
outdoor stuff, I would suggest
yeah,
more mid to East Coast. It's
yeah,
more outdoorsy.
yeah.
All right. Next one for you.
Uh, okay. Priority boarding.
So this is actually interesting. Depending on the type of traveler you are and your flight schedule, it might be underrated, but in most cases, it's overrated, especially for the price you pay, etc. It's overrated. The reason why I say for certain situation it could be useful is, and I actually see the
Connecting flights. For connecting flights, yes, definitely.
for connecting flights, yeah. But that also depends on seating. So for connecting flights, sit closer to the exit, board first, and you can store away your carry-on. What often happens if you're last priority, especially if it's a full flight and a lot of people come with carry-on, the overhead bins get filled. And if you're last priority or the last group that boards, yours gets automatically checked. And then you're still stuck with that. You gotta go get it at baggage claim, etc. And that goes into your time of connecting flights. But in most cases, if you're not in a rush, if you're not too attached to your luggage, luckily in my case, I always found a slot, even though I wasn't last priority in none of the flights. So I was like in the mid to last region. But in most cases, it's overrated because you'll still get into the destinations unless you have very specific reasons that you need to get out early. But if your flight's delayed, you're still screwed. Make
Yeah,
sure you have enough time in your connecting flights, at
definitely.
least 1.5 hours. You never know what could happen.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
I got rebooked the last time because the connecting flights were too close, and I'm really thankful that they did that.
Yeah,
Really, really
because
thankful.
basically my first connecting flight from DC to Miami, it was 1.5 hours. So there was no other in between flight for the flight from Miami to Suriname.
Yeah.
So that's why it was delayed by a whole day. And on
Ah,
and in the rebooking, I could choose my own flights because this was booked by the agency, so I couldn't choose. But at the rebooking, I could choose my own flight, so I took an earlier flight just in case there was a delay, etc. So you have enough time, especially if your connecting flight is once a day. If there's multiple flights, all right,
it's
that's
fine.
fine.
It's fine. But when you have a connecting flight, just take the one with the most leverage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So your next overrated,
Okay.
underrated.
Noise canceling headphones.
No, for me, totally overrated. I mean, like airplane noise doesn't bother me at all.
It's not the airplane noise, man. Like when once I got my noise canceling headphones, literally a baby sits next to you, and you can
No,
just
just just to be clear, when I talk about airplane noise, I'm including kids and babies.
ah
Like first of all, let's remind everyone that noise canceling headphones don't take away the kid behind you sitting kicking in your seat. That's one thing
true,
you have to
true.
understand. Like if you have a bad seat, you just have a bad seat. You're gonna have to deal with it the whole flight. You're able to get up mid-flight. You can walk around. You can sit somewhere else. You maybe able to do a couple of other things. But if you have a bad seat, you have a bad seat. I'll get into that a little bit later. But um, when you're a parent like myself, you really look at crying babies and crying small children in an airplane. You really look at it differently.
Okay,
Like
yeah,
when you travel, when you don't have children and you travel and you have like a small child or a baby that's crying and kicking the whole time, you get annoyed. When you're a parent and you see another parent struggling with their child, not being able to control them, you feel like, oh, I feel for you because I've been through that phase.
okay,
Like
that's a
I've
fair
been through
point.
that
Yeah,
phase twice with my children when they're at a certain age that you can't control them because they're not old enough to talk to you and have like an understanding conversation on what's going on, and they just feel uncomfortable and they just let it out. So once you're a parent and you've experienced that, once you see small children crying or babies crying, you kind of empathize more towards it, and it doesn't bother you as much as then when you're not a parent. So that's my take on
okay,
it. Yeah,
understandable. Got it.
yeah. But about the seating, my next underrated overrated is preferred seating. Overrated or underrated?
Again, this comes with your flight preferences and if you need to get up early. I personally prefer window seats. Uh, but in general, I don't care. If I can select my seat, I'll select it. But I'm
You
not
don't
gonna.
mind the middle seat at
No,
all?
I that
Oh, no.
wait again. This comes with if you're sitting in between two big people, that's gonna be.
No, the middle seat in general. It's
No,
like you have to find, first of all, you have to fight for an armrest. So whenever I'm sitting on aisle or window, if I'm sitting on window,
yeah,
I'm
you can lean
moving
on the
towards the
window.
window and
Yeah,
I give my armrest to the people sitting in the
yeah,
middle. If I'm on the aisle side, I have to be careful to lean on the outside because that cart will hit you.
yeah.
But I will also leave the middle the armrest for the middle person as well if needed.
You're considerate. Yeah,
I'm
some people aren't
considerate
considerate, but
because
yeah, I
when you
still.
are in the middle seat and you have to fight for the armrest, it's the most ah terrible experience.
Here's the thing. For me, it's still overrated because I'm fairly slim, small, so I don't really need the armrest. I can, entertain myself in between.
For me, it's heavily underrated. Like for instance, the red eye flight, especially the flight from California to Florida. If you have one of those flights at night, you need preferred seating, man. Either emergency exit seat, which has extra leg room, but some American Airlines models have like really interesting seating where you can get like super leg room because you have a row of two and then you have a row of three behind it, and a person to the left has like not just his own space, but there's no seat in front, so you have extra leg room. Those seats are heavily underrated. And you can also get the situation which we also had that you get a seat plan from a different airplane that you're flying
Okay,
in,
okay, that,
and
that never
that's
happened.
messed.
That
That's
never
messed
happened
up.
to me.
No, that's messed up. I actually experienced that twice now in the past year. Um, so
Okay.
window seats for the win. Definitely, you can use nice cancellation headphones or just get sequel. And how about your experiences with jet lag?
So luckily for me, I didn't have much jet lag. Yes, I traveled from the East Coast to the West Coast and back to the East Coast, back to the West Coast, but I slept enough. One thing to not underestimate, especially if you travel a lot, find a rest day in between the travels just to rest. Because the worst thing that can happen to you, especially if you're traveling alone, you get so fucked up that you can't even move.
Just don't get jet lag. No, the
So,
worst experience for me is not the jet lag. The worst experience is flying from the West Coast to the East Coast, leaving the West Coast like 10, 11 p.m. and getting in like 4, 5 p.m. in the East Coast. It's terrible. If you have a car that you can drive and go and you can check in early, it's great. But most cases, like for instance, the San Diego, the red eye flight, which is the cheapest flight from San
mm,
Diego to Miami, is 10 p.m. to like 4 o'clock in the morning flight. It's terrible. And then the flight, even if it's 5 o'clock in the morning, the flight to Suriname leaves at 5 p.m. So you have 12 hours from 5 in the morning till 5 p.m. And Miami-Dade Airport is one of the coldest airports there is. It's just cold,
yeah,
ice
always
cold.
have a jacket with you.
That's and then you have to survive those 12 hours, which is grueling, which often means that either you go get out of the airport or you have to get a day room. But if you get a day room, the day rooms are probably only available around 11, 10, 11 in the morning. So you still have to survive for 6 hours in the cold with your luggage, which I recently figured out there's a storage area as well where you can leave your check bag behind as well. That already helps so much because you can move around. You can finally do something. Um, I guess two more questions. One is Wi-Fi in the airplane overrated or underrated?
Okay.
And then
I guess it's overrated. Like if you mean Wi-Fi as in connections
Internet?
to get messages,
Yeah.
internet, I'd say overrated. I'd see the flight on the plane as an opportunity to do other stuff like use your brain, rest,
No,
etc.
I don't agree
Uh,
with that part.
but get disconnected from the internet to not be caught up with everything happening in the world. So basically, what I did on my flights back, I downloaded YouTube videos, like hour-long podcasts, and I just ran through those.
That's one way to go at it. But secondly, the main reason why Wi-Fi on a plane is overrated, the airplanes that offer Wi-Fi have a damn good entertainment system often. Often they
Yeah,
already have a really good
yeah. So
entertainment
you don't
system.
need that either.
So either you have local television and you can just watch, for in my case, you can just watch ESPN the whole flight, or you have a very good selection of movies.
Yeah,
Like my recent trip, I couldn't finish all the movies that I wanted to watch, which were just three. I didn't even get to finish three movies. So that gives you a perception. And then you get disappointed when you're in an old plane that doesn't have a proper entertainment system. But in general, yes, Wi-Fi on the airplane
yeah,
is kind of
overrated.
overrated. And then the last question: what's the best food in the airplane? What's the best food that you can remember having in
The
the airplane?
best food in the airplane is the one you bring yourself.
Yeah, I have good experiences with Suriname Airways food.
Yeah,
Almost always.
if there are one thing Suriname Airways can be applauded for is their
They have
airplane food.
really good food. Suriname Airways has good food.
But
Always has
if
good
you're
food.
traveling Europe, US, airplane food
The,
is
the the worst airplane food I had was churros, but these were like, I don't know if they were microwaved. I don't know what they did with it, but it was just like a churro, which was, I don't feel it was properly cooked, just draped in chocolate syrup or something, and that was the meal. It was like, wait, what's this?
what I always have with me is like two or three those protein bars or energy bars with chocolate nuts, and I always have two or three in my backpack just in case, just to hold me or whatever, and that's enough. It's basically a meal, pack small, and gives you enough energy. And I always have a water bottle with you.
That's a good advice. Always have a water bottle. Definitely good advice. So Diego, I think we did a pretty damn good job of, yeah, doing a traveling episode. I didn't
Yeah,
think we ever done that. So that's nice to
no,
have like
because we could. This is the first time I could really travel after coming back, and
COVID.
uh,
Yeah,
you traveled earlier this year a lot as well. Uh, so yeah, it was a. I gotta say, like with all the restrictions being like no more testing, etc. Feels pretty
oh, it
okay
was
again.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's good.
like
Only how many airlines did you still have to wear your mask?
none.
Ah, that's good.
It was optional everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't have that experience. I had to keep them on the airport and in the airplane for the last travel.
Yeah, literally, I think the weekend after I arrived there, like everything was, you know, simplified or was less strict. Was basically normal again, if you want to call it that.
Awesome. So next week we have another guest, finally, from the USA, Mr. Hollow. And from there on out, we're gonna switch it up a little bit. Behind the scenes, we're slowly working on getting our guest lists up until the end of the year. So we're looking forward to that. Diego, any closing remarks?
No, this was great to give a recap, sharing the travel experiences, some tips, ways to travel. I should maybe make a how to post or video
You have
on
to
how
make a
to
hype
travel.
post about it, Diego. You have to
Yeah,
make a hype post.
literally, and very economically as well. Like I didn't spend that much.
Awesome. We look forward to seeing your hype post. This episode will be released on Confoes.com. You will be able to listen to it there.
Yeah.
You can watch it on Diego's YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to Diego's YouTube page. And of course, this episode is also available to rewatch on Twitch, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter. This was
All right.
Social Confos. See you
See
back
ya next week.
next week, same place, same time. Bye bye.